hearty welcome to everybody here this evening for making your time this evening on Friday to attend. Before I begin, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land upon which we meet this evening and of the country throughout Australia. We recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture, and we pay our respect to the elders, past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge our respected elders who are here from the community as well, our imams, respected imams, community leaders, especially our guests who have taken this time to attend today. And welcome. Thank you for taking the time to come this evening. And of course, my apologies for the interruption a bit. Before I continue, I'd like to invite Sheikh Muhammad Ghazali, who will come on stage to begin the proceedings with a recitation from the Quran and a few words.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين اللهم أخرجنا من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمنا بنور الفهم وافتح علينا بمعرفة العلم وسهل أخلاقنا بالحلم وجعلنا ممن يستمعون القول فيتبعون أحسنه. يقول الله تعالى في القرآن الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. ويقول أيضا وتعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان. Distinguished guests, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of this forum is to create a safe space to ask questions, problem solve, and reflect what it is to be a constructive, contributing, practicing Muslim, and to assist without prejudice or judgment for those whom this is a challenge in Brisbane 2019. Let us be practical and action-focused, whilst I'm not also ignoring and negating the scale and enormity of this challenge. These challenges occur throughout life, from cradle to grave. Be it in terms of physical, spiritual, or mental health related illness, or in terms of educational, social, and economic advancement. This gathering is not intended to be an abstract get-together for a few well-meaning, potentially privileged. It is a gathering of respectful and embracing diversity, urging us to work together with one another for the common good. It cannot be about self-promotion or self-advancement. Rather, it must be modeled from the best examples of all time and according to our mizaj of our Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. There is no doubt that there are complex theoretical constructs around us and often adopted. Reductionism is one where we generalize complex phenomena without sufficient appreciation of specialized areas in its terms. Absolute black and white approaches, short-term fixes, selfie photo moment approaches too often are the go-to way of thinking. Living by social media and dying by social media. Absolutes produce thinkings of angels and devils, creating no redemption and being punitive if a person makes mistakes. This is not our way. And this is not the way of our beloved Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This is not the way he engaged his people. And as a community, we can't take the lazy way out and blame everything on the imams, where they often in their jobs feel compelled to generalize complex phenomena and contend with emerging issues. Rather, we must be practical yet respectful and sensitive around seemingly intractable issues. We would rather dismiss and ignore. So all that being said, to engage with these issues, we must all be one. We must all be together. We all individually have abilities, insightful, compelling ideas. But how do we put these into practice? In the streets, neighborhoods, and communities around us, how do we support our elders and our imams in our communities? I've observed a strange syndrome, which I would like your observations as well. We have incredibly talented, successful, and intelligent people in our community. But when it comes to advancing the services and sustainability of religious activities, we halt using our innovative green mind. And we switch to the red mind, and we stop, and we do not move forward. How many of you have observed this? Please put your hand up. We think somehow, somebody somewhere, reading some mystical brown book, Oceans and Potions, might somehow apply some Ghostbuster thinking, and somehow it will be fine. She'll be right. But on a serious note, to put it simply, we have land, water, and crops. Yet we do not rely on collective expertise to get the best from it for our common good. Maybe it's because socially around us there is a significant increase in resistance in religion in public life. Not only here, but actually all around the world. Accordingly, we have to understand that this is a paradox because we live in a free, pluralistic society. We are urged to think well as Muslims, as we are instructed by the Quran and the Sunnah to be engaged in our community to advance good for humanity and be united. In this room tonight, I am delighted to see the diversity in the individuals, leaders, thought leaders, cultural leaders, family leaders. We are all leaders in our own right, as the Prophet ﷺ said, كُلُّكُمْ رَاعٍ, all of you are shepherds, and you are all responsible. We have that goodness that can change lives, to change systems, to make great positive differences. And we all have this potential within us. And as such, I'm excited about the potential of this gathering, as it's a way for us to take what we individually experience in our localized environments from our lounge conversations and socializing these issues into our consciousness and collectively working together from a range of facets to tackle them, inshallah. I hope you have time to talk, be encouraged, and be inspired. And I hope you also have a bit of a laugh. We can't continue to be a community that produces events that are great one-hit wonders. So watch out for the feedback form, and inshallah we'll have an opportunity to be part of something great beyond this event, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much for the opening words and just setting the scene, I suppose, for this evening. And this evening really is about what has just been said before me, which is about engaging, motivating, inspiring us as a community to get together, to bring together our collective, our individual expertise, our talents, our resources and skills, to really effect change for the positive good, not just for ourselves, not just for the Muslim community, the whole community that we engage with around us in Brisbane and wider Australia. We have a great panel of speakers this evening, which is why you're here this evening. So without much further ado, I would like to introduce our first speaker. Dylan Chow is a research fellow in the Centre of Islamic Thought and Education within the School of Education at the University of South Australia. His research, teaching and engagement focuses broadly on social injustice, social justice and inclusion, specifically on educational justice via critical pedagogies, Islamic pedagogy, and culturally and religiously responsive pedagogy, the methods and practices of teaching. Dylan draws on 20 years of experience across diverse contexts in the field of education, as well as extensive engagement in communities. In his educational practice, he was recognised by the ACHPER with a secondary teacher award for Inspired Program Design Delivery in the Science School. Dylan was also co-founder and co-manager of Backbase, a youth development and mentoring organisation, specialising in the delivery of Indigenous games. Under a prominent board of Brisbane elders, received an award at the prestigious Premier Awards of Reconciliation. Social activism has been the core of Dylan's professional experience and practice. Dylan is a regular presenter at conferences and forums such as the annual Australian Islamic Schooling Conference, the Australian Association for Research in Education, and the upcoming the Australian New Zealand Mental Health Association's 2019, theme of being No More Harm National Conference. Dylan Chow, I'd like to welcome you to the stage.
Bismillahir-Rahmanir-Rahim. I begin in the name of God, most gracious, most compassionate, and ask for blessings upon the paragon of creation, our Prophet Muhammad. Elders, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, respected Imams, I offer you one and all the universal greeting of Assalamu alaikum and peace be upon you. I'd like to begin my presentation by evoking a concept in education. I'm referring to adab, for I understand that adab implies justice and recognition and acknowledgement of the proper place of things. In this spirit, I recognise and acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we gather. I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities as the first people of Australia, and I acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities for their resilience and commitment to shared futures and healing in the face of disruption, injustice and struggle. Ladies and gentlemen, my mission tonight is to do justice, pun intended, to the theme of social activism in education, all in a mere 9 minutes. I am encouraged, however, by the fact that I'm the first speaker this evening, and I have a dynamic co-presenters with me who can pick up the pieces and fill the gaps. Now, in preparing for this mission tonight, I had to ask myself, what limitations do I bring to the task? The first is that I don't actually consider myself a social activist, yet paradoxically, I'm here to talk about social activism. Now, I put to the audience by way of rationale that within my education career, I never sought for position, but I always strove to display leadership in my practice. I've never presented as a community leader, but I strive to display leadership in community. And likewise, I'm not a social activist, yet I engage in social activism. The second limitation of mine is problematic, because I'm a lecturer, and how do I get out of lecture mode? How do I protect you from me this evening? Because it could be a real mood killer. So my solution was simple: to share with you a snippet of my story, of my lived experience of my journey in the field of education, and through this share what I've come to understand about social activism. And I make the disclaimer that it will not be all-encompassing. Now, the preamble of this story began many moons ago, as it often does. Come with me on this one. I've been an educator for 10 years. A little bit longer than 10 years. I find myself sitting at Holland Park Mosque, familiar to us all. I next find myself sitting in the living room of Imam Uzair, who may be with us this evening. After leaving this sitting, I accept Islam. That's the shortest version of the story ever. I pay for the full story. Charge. For me, all the pieces of the puzzle have fallen into place. I take a few months away from teaching, and in what I can only describe as the type of serendipity that only Allah can pave the way. I'm currently living in the house of Uncle Ross Watson, one of the greatest social activists in Brisbane. One of the co-founders, I should say, of the Murray School, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander School in Acacia Ridge. One of the founders of 98.9, and famously, one of the protesters who stood in the battalion of Sir Joe Bjelke-Petersen's police force in the 1982 Commonwealth Games protest, famously walking to the picket line and sitting down and invoking a peaceful protest. He avoided a tragedy. I'm in his house. I've accepted Islam, and I travelled to the household of the grandson of Imam Rain. God bless him. And I spend the next months living in this house, learning what it means to live as a Muslim. From this time, nothing is clearer to me, nothing is more passionate to me than my faith. And as time goes by, I become acutely aware of the distance between my other passion, which is, of course, education. So I have one of those light bulb moments. An Islamic school would be the perfect place for me and an opportunity to combine these two passions, faith and education. So my heart is set on an Islamic school. I have visions of walking into it and spending our days offering salam, of pigeons resting on our heads as teachers and students sit in halakas and student circles. To borrow from the name of this event, soon I experienced a challenge reality. While it wasn't all that I had anticipated, the 10 years that I would spend in this Islamic school I consider to be one of the greatest blessings of my life. Now, you might ask, why was the opening of this story important? It's important so you can appreciate that I was seeking to understand what it means to live as an Australian Muslim, and so were my students. This was a search that in many cases we embarked on together. The challenge I was to find is that the institution was and is in the process of understanding itself. An early distraction, a detour, I would say, was the feeling that I needed to change the institution I had joined. However, greater success came when I instead sought to change myself. This is where understandings of social activism for me began to evolve. Now, one of the highlights in my time at the school was teaching health education, which I was asked to establish. Health education is the subject underpinned by social justice. And I would ask my students, what are the most pressing issues in your life? And we would study these. We designed projects with engagements outside of the school. One of these was an inquiry on homelessness. For this, we partnered with Rosie's. So picture this, we're at Woodbridge train station. It's a Thursday night, it's dark, it's cold. One of my students I noticed spends the entire session sitting on a park bench with a gentleman. Later in the debrief session, he explained to me that the man I sat with, sir, he didn't speak any English, but we found that we share a common third language, a dialect. He tells me he cried as he put his hands and cupped my face. He said, sir, he said to me, he hadn't spoken to anyone in weeks. That he travelled for 12 days on a dilapidated boat, hungry, thirsty, not sure if he would make it. And now he's sitting in Woodbridge, wondering, waiting to learn of his status. They soaked up that moment together that night. My student said to me, I will never forget this. Perhaps some of you will be thinking, listening to such a story, well, you didn't change anything. That's not social activism. You didn't solve the problem. But I think this is another lesson. You see, my students were grappling with statements like, there's no homelessness in Australia. There's no excuse for homelessness in Australia, assembly. My family came to Australia and look what we've done. Why can't everyone else do it? Now, to this we would say, mashallah, but of course this is a dangerous line. It reminds me of something Ivanka Trump said last week. You see, if we view social activism and social justice as cousins, then the other cousin is social mercy, where we have to ask ourselves, how merciful are we? Lessons learned, I would argue, by my students in this inquiry, and by the student who spent his evening with the gentleman. Other highlights occurred in the arena of school sport. Now, one of my first priorities in this school, and I'm reminded of a person who actually told me I had to do this. She's in the audience. One of my first priorities was to present a vision for sport, one intimately connected to faith, and what I could understand could be the faith vision of that school. Now, many people contributed to this vision, and to the enactment of this vision. Colleagues, parents, and most importantly, the students. It would take several years to realise, but this process was something so beautiful In other ways, it was sad. Many of the senior students who believed with me, who pioneered this effort, would not get the opportunity to enjoy the fruits in their time in the school. This would come after they had graduated. And ladies and gentlemen, what a lesson in social activism. Sometimes in the pursuit of justice, we must forego it for ourselves. This was about planting a seed. This was about nurturing it. And we know that from little things, big things can grow. Another one of these indicative moments I'd like to share with you is at a major touch football competition. Picture with me, we arrive, we get off the bus. This is a big competition, the real deal. I'm enveloped by silence and with 50 young people, so that's a statement. All the bravery, all the anticipation, all the preparation has given way to the reality that our moment has come. And it's very clear that all eyes are on us. Perhaps it's me, 6'2", I'm in a Quicksilver hat, Oakleys, a red beard, dressed in robes. My effort towards an interpretation of the Sunnah. For their sake, I hope it's me. If I stop at this point as I'm walking to the tent, 50 students, one by one, are going to hit me behind me. They're that close to me. I get to the tent to register. It's been so long since I've been part of a tournament because I've been in this school for 6 years. I'd forgotten to take my students to their area to settle them before I registered. So the whole team's with me, 50 students. I said, it's meant to be. We'll take this road together. I recognise the two coordinators, HBE teachers, gurus, legs up on the chair, head down in the drawer. It's their zone. This is HBE zone. I wait patiently and they sense, of course, our presence. As they take one look up and one look at me, they instinctively and in unison exclaim, Jesus Christ. I hear a collective intake from the students behind me. I smile and I say, no, Dylan Chow, pleased to meet you. We're here to register. It's moments like this that students observe and students watch. We wouldn't win a game that year, but I saw the change in my students. They got back on that bus with their heads held high, and they arrived back at the school. They told stories like returning conquerors. The light was lit in the younger students, and they were saying, next year I'm going to be on that bus. And you know what? We didn't win a game the year after. We got a draw, which is a sign of progress. You see, the students were participating for more than the game, more than winning. This is when I knew that they bought into the vision. This is when I knew that their intentions for participating were broader. This is when I understood that they understood the value and place of sport and contribution. In the third year, we got our first win. The entire tournament celebrated with us. For students, they had lived a process of personal change, and they'd been an active part in cultural and structural change. I wonder whether my audience can find value in these short snippets. And like any teacher, I've been teaching for 20 years. I've got a treasure trove of memories, and memories with young people happen every single day. And I'll share with you but a couple. But I wonder whether you can find meaning in these highlights. I wonder whether the intersections between education and social activism are clear. For me, education is about nurturing young people that are self-aware, critical, but grounded in their own ways of knowing, confident and comfortable in their own identities, able to function naturally in the world, dynamically engaged and able to contribute. Now, along the journey, I've increasingly located social activism for me within a sacred domain, within my faith. I have come to understand social activism, at least the kind that I'm passionate about, as a commitment to common good within faith, which beautifies and adds value to the world, both local and global, but always with a view to the hereafter. For me, social activism begins with a willingness to change oneself, to work on our own hearts, For me, social activism behooves empathy, compassion, mercy and humility. Surely, ladies and gentlemen, Allah is beautiful and Allah loves beauty. And this invokes for us beauty. For you and I know we have much beauty to offer our communities and our society, and indeed we are. Thank you very much for listening.
Dylan, thank you very much for those words. Inspiring, important. The role that you, along with all teachers across society, take is hugely important, especially for the next generation. And this idea of strengthening and helping young people to strengthen their identity and that pride, to be able to participate positively in society as a whole and to contribute wholly, is very inspiring. Now, no event is obviously whole without the car parking announcement, so I apologize in advance, because it would be amiss of me. There's a black SHH Gold Ranger. The number plate is 544XFD. If you could kindly, nobody will look at the back of it, look forward. If you could kindly just relocate the vehicle, I believe it's causing a bit of an obstruction. Thank you. The car park downstairs. I'd like to introduce our second speaker. Dr. Muhammad Ghanan is a Canadian Muslim from Sudanese and Yemeni background. He has a BSc with a major in microbiology and honours, and a minor in business administration at the University of Victoria. As if that wasn't enough to take care of and contend with, in 2007, Dr. Muhammad began full-time studies in the Islamic tradition. He has travelled extensively to spend time in extended, intensive periods studying various aspects of the Islamic sciences relating to theology and creed, jurisprudence, hadith, fundamentals of principles, usul, Arabic, poetry, spiritual purification, and Quranic sciences, just to name but a few. In May 2015, Dr. Muhammad earned a PhD in neuroscience, as you do, at the University of Victoria, where he studied synaptic plasticity in Huntington's disease. This is just, the impact that this is having on society is already dawning on me. As well as the effects and molecular mechanism of stress on the brain, Fragile X syndrome. For those of you averse, familiar with these concepts, they're very, very, very cutting edge. He's currently studying medicine at the University of Queensland in Brisbane, because I believe he got bored. So without much further ado, I'd like to welcome Dr. Muhammad Ghanan.
It's kind of hard to follow Dylan, but we'll try. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد الفاتح لما أغلق والخاتم لما سبق الناصر الحق بالحق والهادي إلى صراطك المستقيم. The subject of social activism is one that's rife with challenges to try to navigate through, because there's a lot of very driven people, very emotionally invested, very attuned to the concepts of justice, very attuned to oppression and highlighting it wherever it is. And so it can be a bit challenging to speak about it rationally, because human beings are not rational beings after all. Reza Begovich, in his book Islam Between East and West, which I recommend, I always get asked, what should I give to my non-Muslims, Muslim friends who ask me about Islam? Here are the books. Reza Begovich, Islam Between East and West, Muhammad Asad, The Road to Mecca, Charles Guy Eaton, Islam and the Destiny of Man. So Reza Begovich talks in his book about what a human being is. And he says you're this intersection between, you're like a window into the divine. You're the intersection between the spiritual and the material. We're neither material and we're not spiritual, we're both. And Islam is quite unique in that, Muhammad Asad points this in The Road to Mecca, contrary to other religions, we don't have the Cartesian dualism of we're just a spirit and we're trying to get rid of the body, which is kind of taught in traditional Christianity, that the body is bad. or that if you go to the naturalistic route, we're just material, and what you have an illusion of regarding your consciousness, that's just your brain synaptic plasticity going off, and just hormones going on. We're not one or the other, we're both. And so when we talk about social justice activism, you have to acknowledge that. You have to acknowledge that emotions are rationalized, and they drive reasoning as well. You also have to acknowledge that your experience regardless of whatever group that you identify with, is oftentimes unique and limited by the group that you belong to. So, this concept of, for example, of mansplaining. As a man, I can never say from a Muslim perspective, I don't know what it means to wear a hijab. The challenges of the hijab. I can try to intellectualize it, rationalize it. There was a situation where I had my one time where I had somebody kind of give me a bit of a vitriolic attack, go back to your different country, this and that. And I felt this kind of visceral response coming on. My reaction was, I sized up the guy and I could take him. If he comes at me, I can take him. But immediately afterwards, when I was thinking about it, I was like, wow. Just the day before, I was talking to a Muslim sister who was telling me about how often they get that. And when I sent them this message, it's like, welcome to our world. But the thing that I thought of was, wow, my first thought was, I could take him. What if I was a woman? That's not the first thing you think of, unless you're an MMA fighter. But the first thing you think of is fear. I'm about to get attacked. Where can I hide? Is there somebody that can look after me? Is there a crowd over here? Everywhere you go, it controls your movements. There's a burden of wearing this that's just different. So for a guy to speak about that is kind of silly. You'll never get it. And the challenge with social justice activism is to start to recognize that there are some things that you may never get. You just won't. So you just don't talk about it. You let others speak about it. You let those, not for tokenized representation, but you let those who are actually dealing with these challenges speak about these from their perspective, because they know what's best. There's something that teaches in medicine when it comes to the indigenous and Torres Strait Islanders, the cultural challenges. Some people have a disdain for that. They don't like discussing that, but we tell them, get somebody who can translate for you. It's not enough for you to speak English. They speak English. There are certain things that they can translate. Nevertheless, for Muslims, because we're speaking from a Muslim perspective, there's a bit of a discomfort with this kind of all-out, let's just buy into the narrative and just ally ourselves with every group out there that is speaking about social justice without engaging with critical thought about it. The Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us believers, Muslims, He tells us what positioning we should have. That you were the best of nations, not because of any virtue of birth or accident, upbringing or identity. You're the best of nations because you do something. What is that thing? You command for good and you forbid evil. So when we talk about social justice, we have to also define what is just. Is it just equality? Is it equity? Well, how do you define that? By whose standards are you setting these things? If you're promoting, looking after women's rights, for example, what assumptions are you making to fight for women's rights? Are you assuming that for a woman to get equality, she has to meet the standards of a man, and that's quote-unquote success? What are the criteria that you use? So for us, for Muslims, it's the Quran. You always have to go back to the Quran. Imam al-Bukhari writes in his collection of authentic hadiths, he starts off the whole collection with باب العلم قبل القول والعمل. The chapter of knowledge before you speak or act. So you have to ask yourself, what is the criteria? Well, what does Allah and His Messenger say? What does this Quran say? The thing about being social, and I'll just pick up something from Dylan that he mentioned. Islam is kind of unique in that even if you try to be private, it will publicize you. If you're a woman, you're going to put on the hijab, you're public now. If you're a man, you can try to hide it. You could live in an era where I look like a hipster. Can you really tell? Right? But, the prayer comes, sorry guys, I gotta go pray. What are you doing? Where are you going off at these weird hours of the day? Why do you have to take off at 12:30? Then again, you have to take off at 3:30. Then you have to, what's the rush at 6:20? The night is young, I gotta pray Maghrib. That's the rush. So it publicizes you in a way. And when the authors that I mentioned before, as they observed, same with, for the Arab speakers, Malik bin Nabi is a great one to read for as well. They mentioned something about Islam that's quite unique in that there is no division between your moral compass and the actions that you engage in. Politically speaking, what is politics? Politics is an extension of ethics. What is ethics? It's based on some sort of metaphysical perspective. Well, how do you get your metaphysics? For Muslims, we get it from the Quran and the Sunnah. Now, the Prophet ﷺ did tell us, أَحَبُّ النَّاسِ إِلَى اللَّهِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The most beloved of all people to Allah, to God Almighty, is the one who brings the most benefit to all people. But how do you bring this benefit? Oftentimes, people think what's good for them may not actually in the long term be good for them. We're engaged in some really interesting thought experiments that have translated into social experiments that go against the test of time. Whether you go look at it from a naturalistic perspective or from a religious perspective, we're engaging in tinkering with society in quite unique ways. And for Muslims, what it means to be a Muslim, Islam, when we translate it as submission, we submit so that we become free. We submit so that we are not beholden to any expectations. The greatest act of courage that you can take as a Muslim today is actually social courage. We're not left and we're not right. We're not conservative, we're not liberal, we're not progressive, we're not this or that. You can't really put Islam into one camp. Because there are certain things, well, conservatives will agree with. And other things, liberals, sure enough, yeah, we'll go with it. And other things will be progressive on it. Other things will be a bit more traditionalist. But the compass that we use is, again, back to the Quran and Sunnah. And I'll just finish off with this intellectual, social courage that you have. Just as a word of advice to the young activists who, the prophets of social activism, I guess you could say, would be people like James Baldwin, Malcolm X, these great figures. And they are great figures indeed, Malcolm X, rahimahullah. But to be a Muslim is to have the courage to say, that speech that was so powerful that Malcolm X made, the ballot or the bullet, is actually quite problematic. Because in it he says, religion is my private business, keep it at home, it only governs my personal behavior, it has nothing to do with my social and political dimension. That actually is in line with the thing that the people of Shu'aib alayhi salam said to him. قالوا يا شعيب صلاتك تأمرك تأمرك أن نترك ما يعبد آباؤنا ونفعل في أموالنا ما نشاء. Shu'aib, peace be upon him, his people, when he called them to do as according to God's will, they said to him, does your prayer, does your Lord tell you that we can't do whatever we want with our money and with our social behaviors and all that stuff? Now this would be considered a type of, like a blasphemy. Oh my God, you're criticizing Malcolm X. Sure, yeah, you should be able to criticize whoever. The thing about Islam and being in a state of submission is that you have this intellectual audacity almost. That, as a believer, I'm a bit audacious. I don't really buy into some authority that someone gave me, that this person said so, and this person, he or she, whoever they are, they're elevated so high that I don't question it. No, I question it because my compass, my reference point, is not that person's writings. Infallibility ended when the Prophet ﷺ passed on to his Lord. And the last verses were, today I've completed your religion. So I implore and advise and call on to the young activists, the older activists, whoever, because we really can be all young at heart, if you will. Age is nothing but a number. It's really about your connection with your Lord. That's how it is. So if you haven't studied, if you haven't done these things, I just encourage people to go read up, find your teachers, sit with the imam, study with them. And I think I'll leave it at that because I've definitely passed on my 9 minutes. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.
Mr. Muhammad, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us this evening. This idea of activism being this energy, this positive energy which challenges social constructs, attempts to make change, this goes back throughout the history of Islam. It underpins the very nature of what occurred when the prophetic message began 49 years ago. And to continue that, this idea of reminding ourselves what those basics were in terms of that adab or that etiquette, but also not allowing that to hold you back from really challenging yourself as individuals, challenging ourselves as communities, and really pushing the boundaries to benefit and bring about positive change. I'd like to introduce the next section. Hearing things from the screen now. The next section is our speaker, Aisha. Aisha Tosif will be presenting, but before she does, I'd like to provide a little introduction. Aisha graduated from the University of Queensland last year. She studied the Bachelor of Arts, majoring in International Relations and Political Science. And during her time at university, she founded the UQ Muslim Society. Many of you will have seen this profile in local newspapers and online. UQ Muslim was a platform and is a platform that empowers and enables young women and men to create dialogue, discussion and debates in order to challenge perceptions, stereotypes, misconceptions about Islamic faith in the context that we live today. It is a platform for young women to express themselves in an open, safe space and build on foundations of gender equality while celebrating women empowerment. In just 3 years, UQ Muslim has over 400 members. That includes people of all different backgrounds, faiths and cultures. Throughout these 3 years, it has received widespread recognition. It has won the Best Religious Club of the Year award by UQ Union in 2017. Last year, Aisha received a Community Service Award by the Queensland Police Service, and in 2018, she was a young social pioneer of the Foundation of Young Australians. And through this program, she was able to take her Muslim initiative to the national stage. As a young entrepreneur, she envisions to establish Muslim Australia wide as a social enterprise that empowers young Muslim women to reach their full potential intellectually, spiritually, and financially. Aisha is also, just a little bit of spare time on the side, is also a young poet and has recently started her own blog, Reclaim Your Art, on WordPress and Instagram. So I encourage you to check that out on WordPress and Instagram, Reclaim Your Art, to showcase her journey towards self-reclamation into the depths of Islam through poetry and prose. As a father of 2 young daughters, it gives me great honour and great privilege to welcome Aisha Tosif, who will be sharing some thoughts with us this evening.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So, what actually inspired me to write this poem? I was sitting in my kitchen, and this cling wrap was just staring in my face, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to write a poem about this. So I guess the most powerful message I want you to take away from my poem is to go home today and just rid your pantry of this plastic, because it's actually pretty damaging to the environment. It is silence that my mother cling wraps around my body, and with it she seals my lips. In fear we both stand as I grip my mother's hand. Mama, I'm only 6, but Uncle plays bad tricks. Bitter. Silence is our only fix. But when I build our house out of bricks, your lips are allowed to scream. At 17, I had low self-esteem because overnight I became a Muslim extreme. I decided to wear the hijab to challenge societal themes, but I constantly had to redeem my innocence. It created such dissonance, but I became eminent to break these vows of silence by screaming siren. But it was silence in the form of fear, which cling wrapped like a hijab around my head, because it is our silence which seeks to protect our values of shame, honor, and respect. But did you ever reflect? It is your silence which leads you to defect. But there's another dialect of silence. It's how the world speaks. So you wake up with your face glued to your news feed. You see people dying, people crying, America glorifying war, Myanmar executing Muslims in every corridor, India sex trafficking children at 1 crore. China dehumanizing Muslims at the masjid door, Yemen swallowing innocent lives due to a political tug-of-war, Israel occupying Palestine, Kashmir reclassifying since 1989. People are dying, people are crying, but we are cling-wrapped in our own anxious environments, trying to build our own comfortable housing. So, we choose to sit in silence, cling wrapping our ears, eyes and tears, sealing our tongues to protect us against our own fears. It can take years to unwrap all the cling wrap. It can take years to become pioneers and break these vows of silence. Now it is siren that you hear from the house with bricks that my mother built. And every time they guilt-tripped me to keep me silent, it was Islam with guidance that generated my sirens. Now these sirens ring in my mind and clear my horizon. This fire alarm warns me against tyrants. Alert your attention, because now my voice frightens when I scream siren to people who are compliant, people who are lying, people who are hiding, people who are silent. But what's stopping your defiance? Is it the cling wrap? Or did you choose your silence?
Inspiration, motivation, encouragement comes in all forms. I just thank you very much for that. Very inspirational. Throughout this evening, and part of this event was, as I said, and as the speakers said, about challenging ourselves. It's about challenging our realities, and it's about engaging, becoming change makers in society and engaging. I would encourage you all, as you are already doing, to continue to ponder on the insights that we're receiving this evening. Because as you see from the setting that we have here, there will be a question and answer session at the end of our panelists' speeches. I'd like to introduce our third speaker. Rehan Bibi was born in Pakistan. At a young age, she moved to Norway, where she trained as a journalist. She completed her formal tertiary education at the University of Queensland. She has extensive experience in community journalism and was the chief editor of the Australian Muslim Times for 5 years. Rehan is an advocate for women and their empowerment. She is currently working on a variety of different projects in community engagement, both locally and abroad. Rehan is most passionate about uplifting others through mentoring and support, and her favourite quote is, "Journalism is a force for social change." Rehan, I'd like to welcome you to the stage.
Before I start, I'd like to get to know you a little bit. So I just have one question. It's a bit dark, so I'm just going to move over here a bit. Please raise your hands if you consider yourself a social activist. Thank you for participating. When I was asked to speak at this panel, I thought of all sorts of reasons why I'm not suitable. I also suggested names of women in the community who I thought would be a better candidate than me. I had lots of doubts, but earlier this year I decided I was going to do things even if I was fearful. And so earlier this week, I went to East Java to climb Mount Aj. And it was a 3-hour climb in the middle of the night. It was freezing conditions, tackling sulfur fumes coming up from the volcano. Once on the top, we waited for 2 hours for the sunrise. Why I'm sharing this? Because we all feel fear, but we need to take action in spite of it. When I was 3, we moved from Pakistan to a small country town in Norway. I first learned to speak Norwegian fluently and then English. Growing up, I witnessed my dad always being of service to others, especially extended family in Pakistan. I wanted to grow up and be a doctor and return to the homeland and make a difference. But as I grew up, I realized there were other ways of making a difference. I pondered about social work. My dad suggested I should be a politician. He said you can make a bigger change and help make change on a bigger scale. I was like, nah, I don't want to be a politician. There should be other ways to make change and make a difference. He encouraged discussions and debates. And one of the most valuable lessons he taught me was to never be afraid to speak up and to voice my opinion, as long as it's done in a respectful way. This is something I have passed on to my kids. Sometimes it's a challenge when my kids question me, but rather that it means that they'll be alright in the world. As a teenager, I joined the local paper as a youth reporter. I was a bit fed up of lack of migrant voices and stories that I couldn't relate to. When I was assigned stories to do with young people, I would make sure I interviewed people of diverse backgrounds. I had a supportive team, but they knew very little about my culture and religion and the wider migrant society. At the time, I didn't realize it would be my lifelong career. I continued over the years to give voice to those who are often not heard in mainstream media, raising issues that can build bridges and create understanding. At times, it would be the link between the young and the older generation in the migrant communities, because I also saw that there was a gap between first-generation migrants and the second and third generation. Through my stories, people could understand their kids better. While working in Australian Muslim Times, I always tried to bring positive stories forward so the community could find inspiration, especially with all the negativity in the mainstream media. While working there, I also was very passionate about making a writer out of anyone who showed a tiny bit of interest in writing. I think anyone can be a writer as long as you have something valuable to share, something that will inspire, educate, or bring people together. In this same fashion, while planning this speech, I felt prepared to share more than just my voice. I spoke to women in the Brisbane Muslim community and asked them what social activism meant to them, what kind of social activism they were involved in, and what were some of the challenges they met along the way. Unfortunately, I couldn't include all the voices, so as the people came back to me, I've just added them, so it has the sequence of my slides has no, I haven't made them like in a certain way because of any reason. So I want to share with you some of the stuff, some of the words the women have shared with me, and you can read the slide as they come up, but I'll give you snippets of that as I go along. So Susan Olmani is a social worker and the fundraising queen. I'm sure a lot of you know who she is. If work needs to be done, she didn't wait around, she just got it done. She says that there's no excuse these days as it's easy to mobilize people via social media. Shinaz is a paraplanner who is passionate about caring for the environment. This is amplified through her everyday actions, choices, behavior. Shahana is a dentist and an educator who tutors foreign dental graduates in strategies which help them to understand most recent Australians' best practice and also overcome language and communication barriers which have no bearing on colleagues' expertise. As a social activist, writer, and public speaker, Ikra uses the power of her written and spoken words to help people realize that their voices matter. Mariam Al-Shami, who has a background in film and education, said that it's no longer about doing good for your community, but actively seeking justice for those that have no means or voice to seek it for themselves. Issues and injustice were once exposed through film and television, but with more people connected to the internet, it is so much easier to reach people across the world and tell your story. Cheyenne has worked in the travel industry and is actively working in the children's school community. She encourages people to accept the differences, to live and let live. Nora, as you all know, has done a lot of different things in the community, but one of the things is that she's done a PhD in social activism in the Muslim community. And she said that she's always looked inwardly to see how she could affect change on those issues rather than waiting for others to do so. Fatima, an early childhood educator, said that she doesn't believe activism has to be loud and large to have an impact. Research, a single mom and a solicitor, said that social activism for me is a support-driven assistant of the oppressed, without judgment and an immense amount of love and mercy, with the intent to empower and offer solace, guidance, love and comfort to those going through trials. Nasima, a tourism professional, said she believes in the power of one to create change and make those ripples through society. The motto that I strive to live by is, in a world where you can be anything, be kind, she said. I would like to share one more voice. It's anonymous. The person felt that they're not a social activist. And they're saying, I don't consider myself an activist in any way, socially, politically, or religiously, or economically. Activists are charismatic leaders, have passion for a cause, and bring about change through education, exposure, and by mobilizing others. I take care of my family, go to work, and try to lead a good life. I'm not an activist. I'm not going to change the world or make any notable difference. I'm just a person trying to be a better one. I encourage her to look at it in a different way, because this is a form of social activism. So when you make a change in your inner circle, and then you go to the wider one, and then globally. And I forgot to print out the slides, so I'm using my phone. Did you notice that the women had something in common? They're all action takers. I have one more slide, which I thought was important to add. As women, I'm not sure, many people must have seen this. I saw it too, and I could relate to it. But I was sitting there and looking at it, and then I asked my daughter, who's 8-year-old, I thought, let me check what she thinks. And Noha said, I said, what do you think of this photo? And she said, oh, they're wearing the wrong outfits. They're wearing the wrong shoes. How can you run in this? And I said, what else can you see? And she said, well, why are there like washing machines and clothes in front of the women? And I said, well, this is just demonstrating that women have still got house, even if they go to work, and they still have housework, and there's challenges that they face, but then aside from being at work. And she said, well, Mom, I think the women can still win if they believe it, and even if they have to do all that stuff, they could still be the winners. I thought that was quite brilliant for an 8-year-old to come up with that, because I hadn't looked at it from that perspective. But I want to leave you with one final thought before I ask you for your last participation. Next time you see obstacles in your path and you start to wonder why this is happening to me, I want you to change it around and realize that this is happening to you. These challenges are making us better people and giving us strength to be better Muslims. As you remember in the beginning of my talk, I asked you to all raise your hand if you consider yourself a social activist. So now, having shared with you the variety of ways that each of us can be social activists in our sphere of influence, I'm going to ask you again. Please put up your hand if you consider yourself to be a social activist or you have been inspired to become one. Thank you.
It's really interesting all those snippets that you were sharing from all the other activists and all the other ladies from within the community that you quoted and you heard from. And I think this would be fair to say is that you have some people who are just born with that inner confidence. People call them leaders, they'll say they have a presence. I'd say the vast majority of people have doubts, have fears, have anxieties. How am I going to do anything? I am just an individual person. And it's interesting that the individuals that you heard from, including Rihanna and all our speakers this evening, and maybe this resonates with you also, that they're all accomplished in their own rights, and yet they still have those same fears and those doubts. And that is natural, that is normal, but it's about overcoming those. And I believe this to be an environment, to be a platform, an opportunity to share these insights. And that's what I'd like you to do right now. We're going to take a few minutes away from the speeches. And we're going to ask you just to look to your left, to your right, in front of you, behind you. Speak to somebody in the audience who's present here with you this evening. And talk about something that you may have picked up, something that's resonated with you so far, just before, a few minutes before our final speaker and before the Q&A session. And if there's maybe one particular issue, whether it's personal to you, personal to your role that you play in society and to your community, or whether you see something as a wider issue, is there something that you've heard here this evening that has helped you, that's resonated with you, that's given you the strength or the motivation and inspiration to enact? Go for it. Just a few minutes. Don't be shy. Introduce yourself to your neighbours. I'd like to introduce our last and final panel member before we move to the Q&A session. Anas Abdullah is the CEO and co-founder of My Money Co. Established in 2015 in response to an appetite for change in the financial services industry, My Money Co. is one of the fastest growing financial planning firms in Australia. Anas has worked across the private and public sectors both domestically and internationally. His CV includes a number of top ASX and Fortune 500 companies. Recognised for his contributions in leadership, he was elected chairman of the Future Leaders Group, Queensland Supply Chain and Logistics Association in 2012. He's been involved in the community for many, many years and is an accomplished global keynote speaker and presents on a diverse range of professional and humanitarian issues. He devotes his spare time to working with national and international non-profit organisations and has been actively involved from the grassroots level in human rights and social activism from a very young age. Without much further ado, Anas Abdullah.
Assalamu alaikum. All that tyranny needs to gain a foothold is for people of good conscience to remain silent. Social activism is a responsibility that falls upon us all. It needs to be approached with the forethought and maturity it demands. Both the freedom and the responsibility to participate in the society in which we live, to act for social change, to struggle, to speak out for what is just. It belongs to us all. The spirit of activism must remain alive in our schools, our universities, places of worship, our homes. This is where hope resides. This is where change is born. I refer to the freedom to act. Because while we campaign or we're politicking, we're marching or we're lobbying for the betterment of our society, let's reflect for a moment on the sacrifices of our forebears. For they have truly won the very freedom to participate that we enjoy today. Since time immemorial, there have been those that have dared to act against injustice. In many cases, facing social exclusion, financial ruin, criminal prosecution, loss of freedom, and even the loss of life. A 10th century general emancipated a holy city whilst the blood ran knee-high to the horses. An African American firebrand whose mantra, by any means necessary, or the ballot or the bullet, mobilized an entire generation. A lady that defied an entire nation and a bus driver's orders, sat at the front of the bus. A young Madiba spent half a lifetime in prison while fighting a system of institutionalized racism and racial segregation. The citizens around the world united peacefully to exert enough economic pressure to isolate that same regime. And in Indigenous Australia, that fought tirelessly to bring an end to a 2-century-old lie, terra nullius, and whose name is now synonymous with Aboriginal land rights. These men and these women and these activists and many other men and women whose names are not recorded in history are champions of change. They are activists. They paved the way. This evening I'm joined by my fellow panelists and previous speakers who share different life experiences. We all grew up on different continents, we're from different races, we speak different languages. Yet we are linked by a common thread, and that's our lived understanding of what it means not to belong. I grew up on the north side of Brisbane, correct to the left as well, where my family were clearly and visibly very different. My mother was probably the only lady at that time on that peninsula to wear the headscarf. The school principal, a white-haired man in his late 50s, would address my mother as sister. His leadership, his honour, his inclusiveness were etched into my memory. 10 years forward, on the south side of Brisbane, another white-haired man, exercising his democratic right to free speech, abused and assaulted my mother for wearing the headscarf. That day, we had become the other. His angry demeanour and vile words were also etched into my memory. These defining experiences offered two ways forward: a choice to hate or the choice to work for change and dare to believe in the potential of change. The values of our Islamic traditions instilled in me a duty to choose the moral high ground, and from the local neighbourhoods to the greatest offices we spoke, and we speak for those without a voice. Protect those that are bullied at schools and represent those imprisoned for their political beliefs. Through protests, through speeches, lobbying, and even hosting politicians, I spoke at universities, I marched on Parliament, we did what we could to raise the flag of hope for all our people all over the globe that are subjected to the cruelty of illegal occupations or the hypocrisy of government at the highest levels of office. The grassroots. We created youth groups, multi-faith round tables. We worked with the police, the Anti-Discrimination Commission. We spoke at schools and walked alongside church leaders. We worked to build bridges in our own community, in our own very backyard, to eliminate stereotypes and stigmas. We did. We raised money for the domestically abused from all communities, those that couldn't afford medical treatment, not only in faraway places, but in the suburbs that you and I live in. We raise awareness for homelessness and poverty. We work on creating equal pay for equal rights in corporate Australia, both men and women. However, today, I'm active in a variety of different ways. Whilst the objective remains the same, with age has come appreciation for strategy. And this very message that I share with you tonight. The challenges we face are real. And there's no signs of them easy. So be intelligent and sustainable in your efforts. And importantly, always choose courage over fear. To the naysayers, the pessimists, and those that think the fight is over before it's even begun, let me remind you that those that I spoke about before, those successful activists that have come before us, their names will echo for eternity. They brought change in the face of impossible odds. They overcame. They, of all people, were not naive to the way the way the world works and the challenges that we face. Neither should we be. However, we should not be disheartened by the perceived growing inequality, the spectre of human rights atrocities, the change in our climate, the increasing homelessness in our streets, or the poverty and diseases that plagues many around the world. It is at these times that we may feel our efforts are in vain, but instead let it drive us. Let us have the wisdom to understand that social change starts small, gathering momentum by our unyielding belief in and firm commitment to the immense potential for positive change. We, the people, by the instrument of our creed, should never, ever lower our sights. Do not blame another. Do not wait for anybody else. You take lead. This journey is the journey that you and I will forge. Pray, learn, study, boycott, march, email. Do whatever you can, because each day brings further opportunity, further hope. That can be the legacy of our generation. That can be your legacy. Thank you very much.
What we'd like to do now is to invite our panelists to make their way up to this nicely arranged, comfortable setting. Hands gone up, thank you so much. If I could just ask you, as part of this Q&A, we'd like to make it as productive as possible, as forward-moving as possible. If you can just introduce yourself by name and just ask your question, and if it's for a particular panel member, then mention the name. If not, then we'll share a lot. First question.
So my name is Warren Boashash, and my question is to everybody, all the panelists. The title of the session today is Social Activism and Rewriting the Narrative. There's been lots of treatments of the question of social narrative, but social activism. But the second part, has not been dealt with. And I came here because I felt that's what's important. So it would be appreciated if you could put a little bit more accent on this during your discussions. Thank you.
So is that a comment, or would you like to? Is that a question in terms of would you like the panelists to express themselves around the whole challenging and changing narrative?
It is both a comment and a question. The comment is that, in your choice of presentations, you have put the focus and accent on the first part, the main title, which is social activism. However, so I believe that what's important is to rewrite this narrative so that the social activism applies, for the benefit of Muslims, and not just, be a copy of what non-Muslim Australians would do. In particular, if I can refer to one of the photos that the lady just had in her slides, like the last slide was a photo of several runners, females and males. And for me, it's an example of what could be done and should be done, that, if you apply the second part of your title, the title of the session, which is rewriting the narrative, then I would have selected a photo where the women would wear a hijab, and the men would not wear like typical Western, clothes.
Forgive me, can I just, because obviously we've got a few people in the audience, can I just send this to the audience, panel members now, if that's okay? Thank you so much.
This is the difficulty of the speech is 9 minutes. You can't really talk about everything you want to talk about. But with regards to the focusing on the second part of the title, rewriting the narrative. With all due respect, the comment about the hijab and the suits and whatever, I view that as a bit of just a superficial layering. There's a deeper thing that we need to get into. When I look at that photo, the first thing the cartoon, the first thing that popped into my head was the Prophet ﷺ took care of his own washing his clothes, he participated in the cooking, he took care of the kids at home. And whenever I bring that up, I sometimes have some guys come up and say, like, I work 13 hours a day and then I come back and you expect me to do this? He ﷺ was building a nation and he still came back home and he did this. So, spare me. So, to talk about rewriting the narrative, I would say that, in Surah Al-Nahl, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that with Ibrahim alayhi salam, in Ibrahim kana ummatan qanitan billahi. He was a nation unto himself, Ibrahim alayhi salam, Prophet Abraham, peace be upon him. Why was he a nation unto himself? It's because he stood up and he challenged, he rewrote the narrative. He was the only one amongst his people who stood up and said, what you guys are doing is messed up. So, for us, the challenge is to basically look at these situations and go, if you look at that cartoon, talking about, just to give you a bit of a rewriting of the narrative, this is a capitalist kind of society, consumer society, that rewards production. And if it's going to reward production, who's going to be the most productive? In terms of financial things and work, it's going to be the male. Let's just face it, women, when they get pregnant, they have kids, it's going to set them back a little bit, they have to take care of a lot of things. So by virtue of biology, they're going to be limited. They're just not able to participate as much in the production cycle. So the problem is actually systemic. The structure of society rewards workaholics. And so you have a news piece that came out yesterday, I think it was, of the coach of an NCAA basketball team. 2 days after she gave birth, she celebrated for going back to work. Maybe that's her passion. Great, go ahead, do what you want to do. But is it really about her passion, or is this a problem, socially speaking, that we've set up our society to reward being a cog in the wheel, being a production machine, and the more you can produce, the better that you are. And so you're going to be set up with these cartoons that I look at the society itself, and we as Muslims should go, why is work valued that much? To the degree that it rewards people, and to that degree, and it advantages men. That's what we need to question and challenge.
Thank you. You covered a lot of some of the stuff I was going to say. The reason I chose that photo is that I find that sometimes the challenges women find to be active in the community or participate in different things is that we have to look after we might be working, we have children to look after, and often in my community work I would consider, how's it going to affect the family, the kids, should I really do it or not? And that's why for many years I stayed at the back of the news. Like I did a lot of the work, but I wasn't participating at the front or the face of the newspaper because I found that it wasn't aligned with myself, of my duties as well as being the kind of mom that I am, that I want to be involved with my children, and I guess also a bit of guilt that I would feel if I would be away from them. I think it was important that my husband supported me and encouraged me to be more and more active and visible as the editor of the newspaper. So without support from him and the extended family, I wouldn't have been able to be participating. Even tonight, if he wasn't helping me, I wouldn't be able to participate. And that's what I feel a lot of women have those kind of, not, I guess sometimes we impose those restrictions on ourselves, but we have to realize that when your husband is working full time and then you're saying, okay, let's do tag teaming, and at the end that is what made me leave the job as well, because I was kind of tired of tag teaming. Like, okay, now it's your turn to babysit, now I'm going to do my work, and then I don't like to use the word babysit because we're both parents, and he's a dad and I'm the mom, but just to demonstrate what I was saying. Yeah, and there's other aspects of the photo which I felt in my 9 minutes I couldn't discuss, but it is that if we're having children and then we have to take time away from, we take time away to raise our families, we stay back in our, in the, what is it called, the ladder, like the career ladder. So then if I'm away for a few years, and I go back to work, I have to kind of start from the bottom again, which is another discussion which I don't think this is the right time to talk about. Thank you.
Thank you, panel members. As you can imagine, all of our panel members have so much to contribute to each of these questions, but we do want to get to a few more questions. But at the same time, we also want to encourage this conversation. Do not allow this conversation and these questions and these issues to be brushed under the carpet. They need to progress, and we need to do exactly what Mohammed said, which is have that systemic change, whether it's within our houses, within our families first, in the society, and then so on and so forth. I'm just going to move on to our next question, and if you can please place your hands up and the microphone will come around to you.
Yes, Lennon. Yes, my name, those of you who know me would understand that I move between quite a few communities within Brisbane and within Queensland at various levels. But one of the comments that have come out of this great evening was the use of the term social courage, which I will be using again myself. Please don't quote after me for plagiarism. But I want to expand on that if I could, because somebody once recently said to me that there's no profit in activism, and there's got to be money to be made to make people active in that field. And on that note, I came an example of somebody who's ridiculed that recently. In 2012, I witnessed a shahada. He's a well-known murderer, drug dealer, and now very strongly practicing Muslim. Last weekend, I witnessed his activism. The shahada of a fellow who is doing a long period of time in jail, who identifies as an Aboriginal, and another one who's doing just as long in jail, who could only be identified as a Northside skippy. That man's activism has got a profit, and he's accepting that profit. I wonder if you could put your ideas forward of how we could make a profit in our activism, whether it be financial to encourage more, or moral, religious, anyway. Thank you.
I like how the panel members pass the microphone to the next. I know age is not a limitation, but any stretch of imagination. The Parsha is fully accomplished in our own right.
I think you're right about having profit. And, you know, a lot of people, they volunteer so much time into social activism, and, you know, money is an important part of, could be an important part of that. I mean, you know, you constantly have to renew your intentions first, you know, that you're doing this selflessly and for a good cause and everything. But also, money's important to sustain yourself. So I guess my whole idea, like I can just share my experience with you, of taking Muslim to a national level was to create a social enterprise to be able to not only empower these women spiritually and emotionally and intellectually, but also financially, because I feel like the work that we do is really valuable, and we need to be able to make a profit out of that as well. And with social enterprise, the whole idea of the narrative is to actually get people to pay, and you make revenue, and then you're able to give that to charity and also pay people that are working in the organisation.
If I understood the question correctly, it's about activism. Can you make a profit from activism? Is that right? Is that the question? Is that right? Okay, so somebody said to me a few days ago, don't save the tree, buy the rainforest. Right? So, yeah, it could work, right? I think if you know, money influences, money mobilizes, absolutely it works, but that does not discount all the other types of activism. Some of the greatest change agents and champions didn't do it with cent, right? So I think there's multiple ways of activism, and that's just one stream of it.
Thank you very much, sir. Where is the microphone running? So we have a question over there. Yeah, please raise your hand. The microphones will come right to you.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thanks to you all for the fantastic presentations. Just one comment before I ask the question. Going back to the first question that was asked, I think it might have been a difference in interpretation, but I definitely feel that changing the narrative was addressed. I gained a lot from what you guys said in that regard, so thanks for that. My question is specifically to Dylan. You have always been a fantastic asset to our community. So my question is, when are you coming back to this community? And when are you bringing Dr. Bill with you?
Jazakallah for your kindness. It's funny, wherever I go, I pick up packages for Professor Muhammad Abdullah. I've got one with me now to deliver to him. So I'm going to have to start charging him, but he's my boss. Look, my heart is in Brisbane, and I actually live half of my time in Brisbane, so I'm still here. My family's here. We speak about, the question was about profit, but also sometimes it's about sacrifice. And for me, I spoke about education quite broadly, and in 9 minutes, you don't want to open up a can of worms that doesn't make any sense. So I tried to narrow it down to a point in time that maybe resonates with our community. However, going on from there, we're now, I'm motivated by, it's a famous African environmentalist. She speaks about the hummingbird. And there was a great fire. And it was taking it everywhere. And the hummingbird went and picked up a drop of water, a small bird, and kept taking that drop of water to the fire. And all the elephants and the bigger animals that could have had the potential to carry so much more water looked at this and said, this is hopeless, this will never change. And the hummingbird kept going and kept going. And her message was that she's going to be the hummingbird. So I thank you so much for that kindness, because this is my home. But I've been motivated by her, and I'm going to pick up drops of water, and I really believe in the renewal of Islamic schooling. And to do that, rather than profit, I'm looking to try and make sacrifice and work within the broader movement, and that's what I'm really passionate about. The hardest thing, apart from living in Brisbane, was to leave the privilege of the relationship that I had with my students, and that is a sacrifice. I've left that. And each day that goes by, it saddens me, because most of them are married, most of them are having children, so I'm getting less invitations to the weddings. So more time goes by, but I see them and it brings so much joy. So I guess that's something for me that it's a sacrifice. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you so much. Dylan, be responsible for the question. So we have a question here at the front. Please give your name and your question.
Hi. I'm Tasmia Ahmed, and how can we as a young generation or normal people, not on platforms, do stuff for social activism? Because that wasn't said in any of the speeches. Also, I loved all your speeches. They were really good.
So would you like to answer that question?
Thank you for your question. I think it's up to people who have platforms to be able to give that mic onto young people that are sitting in the audience as well, and let them have that platform to be able to voice their opinions. And I feel like sometimes what happens is that when people have platforms, they, make it about their ego or it becomes about who they are and how famous they're going to get through their platform. But I think what's important is that like people that have platforms, they're able to pass on that mic to everyone in the audience, or people who have, things to say that are very, very important, and to, help them, mentor them, and, become role models for them.
Can I? That's a brilliant question, right? Well done, really. I should serve a round of applause for that question. Really. I'll tell you what, seriously. So she's listened to all of us talk, and she said, what can I do? Right? So for me, that's a shortcoming on mine that I didn't get my message across effectively, really. Good question. Not only what can she do, what can we all do, right? That's the point of this, right? So the question is, what can I do? For what it's worth, my opinion, right? When you're at school and somebody's being bullied, you stand up for that person, right? When somebody's being teased, if you're at school, right? Who is at school, whatever, right? People are at school here. When somebody's being teased, somebody's being bullied, somebody's being excluded, somebody looks different, somebody smells different, somebody's clothes aren't as nice as your clothes, you stand up for those people. That's where it starts, right? When you're at university, right, and there's a group, and you want to work in a group, and somebody doesn't fit into that group, or it's not right, or somebody's picking on somebody, you stand up for that person. When you see something's wrong, somebody's swearing, disrespecting a lady or a colleague or whatever, or a lecturer is not treating his students equally, you stand up for those students. When you're in the workplace, right? Corporate Australia, I've spent most of my life in corporate Australia. I've seen a lot of things towards me, but I've also seen a lot of things to white middle class women do. Right? Don't engage in that conversation, in that narrative. Right? Exclude yourself from it. If you can't talk about it, exclude yourself from it. Make it known that you're not comfortable with people talking about other people, whether they're Aboriginal, whether they're women, whether they're Muslim, whether they're Jew, whatever. Everybody can do something. You don't need a platform, you don't need a microphone, you don't need a social presence, you don't need to be an imam, a sheikh, or a politician. Everybody can do something. Understand what you can do and build on that. Hope that you can take away
Hans, thank you very much for that. We're going to have a few more questions, and I know there are lots of people in the audience who want to ask, so please do keep them coming. This whole, and this goes back to your question, thank you for asking the question. This whole event is about realizing the potential that we have as a community in our experiences and our shared experiences and how we move those forward. I challenge you to ask questions or to even engage in those discussions that lead us into that mindset, lead us to that growth mindset.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Princess Lakshman, or you can call me Ikra. I feel that social activism first starts from a paradigm shift within an individual. I say that with conviction because I was a closet Muslim all my life until 7 years ago when I actually embraced Islam, and that resulted in being disowned by family members to this day. With social activism in the home, my question is, what I have observed with Muslim families is a lot of emphasis on cultural loyalty as opposed to doing what is righteous and required within the religion. Cultural loyalty plays a huge part because not always is loyalty right. As parents in the Muslim community, as fathers, guardians of the family, what is your tip to the fathers present here today? We've heard a lot about women's challenges, motherhood, blah, 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 but fathers play an important role in Muslim families, being our guardian in the family home, in the family unit. If we're looking to unite the ummah and the home itself is, suffering in its unity, the father has a lot of emphasis, a lot of role to play in terms of finding that unity. What is your advice to our fathers here today?
I'll just tell you one thing. Imam Ali, the cousin of the Prophet, he said, raise your kids for their time. not for your time. And one of the challenges that, because I experienced that growing up in the West, with parents who immigrated from the East, Africa, it's different cultural expectations. My wife is Lebanese, also they have their own cultural expectations. It's a challenge that we have to negotiate with the elders and tell them and remind them constantly, whatever country they come from, that I get where you're coming from, but this is not religious and it is not part of this culture here, where we were born and grew up and got raised in. But that does, it actually creates a cognitive dissonance. From a male perspective, guys, especially those who come from an Eastern kind of upbringing, we like control. Let's just be real here. They like the dictator kind of attitude, the I'm the boss, I say how it goes, I say what happens. And the idea of just letting go, just trust that you raise these kids upright. Just let it go. You've put in the seeds, just let it go. Raise them for their time. You grew up in a different context, a different era. For God's sakes, there's a lot of people here that have never known a life without a social media account. And that comes with its own baggage and its own kind of expectations and things like that. So, the advice to the fathers is you need to educate yourself. The same way that we go on self-improvement and read about business things and the education that I pursued and all these things, well, for your marriage with your spouse, you should also read up on it. There's a lot of literature available that Gottman Institute, shout out to Gottman Institute, read all their articles on that, to have a proper relationship with your spouse, with your wife. And then also read on raising kids. Because there are people who have done this, who've looked into the research. Take advantage of it. Don't try to just fly by the seat of your pants and think that you're going to make it work and experiment. Learn from other people's mistakes is the advice that I would give.
So that's just a phenomenal question, which is why I was looking to avoid it. And a phenomenal answer, mashallah. I can't add much. I assume you're talking about Anglo culture, or not. So you're talking about culture, yeah. Why I say that is because perhaps there'd be a perception that that's not an issue in my house. However, it's a unique situation. And I'm just talking lived experience. I haven't got anything as instructive as what's been said. But for us, there's been a level of transparency. I've married an incredible woman. She's married me, probably. Is that the way of looking at it? Now, she's born in Kenya, identifies as Rwandan, got a scholarship to Norway, and a further scholarship to the UK, where I married her. She married me. And then now she's an Australian Muslim. Now, in our household, and then myself, my father arrived here at 2 years of age from England. Whereas my mother, my maternal side, all Scottish, Welsh, Irish, farmers. So I'm the only Muslim in my side of the family, the only person in my side of the family who identifies as Muslim. And on my wife's side, she's the only one on her side of the family who identifies as Muslim. Neither of us identify as converts. We identify as Muslim. Conversion was a verb, was something we actually, a process that we went through. And we don't fly a convert's hat, but we're Muslims. And beyond that, we're Australian Muslims. Because, and this, I guess, that beautiful question that was asked about what do we do, the message that, and again I see that in 9 minutes sometimes you try to do too much. I think the biggest message I was trying to sort of put forth is to really deeply understand yourself and deeply understand your own context and your place within it. Within our family, we're doing that explicitly and we're doing it transparently. What we are ground zero for what it means to be a Muslim family. I have beautiful examples. I've been blessed to be exposed to beautiful examples of families, like those that do and do not identify as Muslim. And now it's about thinking what values are important in our family. Also, to the last point to add to yours, my wife, it's about being cognizant of stages. And my wife supported me in 2 career transitions, significant ones, major ones. We had 2 further children. together. And whilst it might be challenging for me, it's arguably a whole lot more challenging for her. Even the physical, the recovery, 2 or 3 years of sort of recovery. Now I'm looking at it, and I'm looking at the stage that we're at, and my wife supported me all this way. She's been the heart and soul of our household. Our kids are growing up, alhamdulillah, but she's entering that period that many women do, I think. Well, so far as we know, inshallah, our family is complete. And now it's sort of, she's entering into it's her time again. So now I'm really cognizant of the fact that, now I tell her how wonderful she is, but of course my credibility is low. So one of my tactics is to make sure she's around other women that can give her that sisterhood and remind her what I'm telling her, which is not maybe making the impact. These are just sort of they're not answers, but they're just, that's the strategies that we're working with.
Time is obviously running very short, and we only have time now for 2 more questions. So we have one at the back there, and one here. So just those 2 questions there. Right front over there.
Yeah. Everyone. Yeah, I'm just asking a question. It's about what can most young people do if they, I like to advise you, what can you guys advise, like what most young people do if they get stopped by the police, if they get arrested by the police, you know, what kind of advice can you guys give them? And also, as a young Muslim, especially growing up in Brisbane, is that where can young people go find support? What network can young people go, seek help? If it's cancer or drugs or whatever it is, where can we go and find help?
If I've understood the question, the brother asked the question, and that's if police stop you, how do you deal with police?
Yeah.
Right? And for social matters like drugs or tough personal circle at risk, where can you go for help? Is that right?
Yeah.
Is that the 2 questions? I could just understand.
They're 2 separate questions. So
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So if the police stop you, what can you do? Right? Just run, brother.
We can run our own way.
They shoot to kill. No. So, what do you do, man? I don't know, right? I've been stopped by police, a number of times, right? Last week I got stopped by the police, right? I think you just got to be respectful, man. You got to be like, okay, well, you just talk to them. Don't get aggressive. Don't get angry. I've seen my mates get angry, get arced up, and it caused more problems. Diffuse the situation. Be calm, be collective. Just understand what's going on and try to keep the peace. That's probably the only advice I can say. Being tough and bridging up and yelling and screaming, these are my rights, it's just going to make matters worse. Right? And it depends who you deal with. It depends the spot that pulls you up. Some are right, some might be different. Probably the best advice, I don't know. Right? That's from experience. Right? I've been pulled up, my mates have been pulled up, we've had encounters and brushes with the law and whatever, right? Grab a red cliff right out of that, right? so there you go. Right? So yeah, just keep it cool, man. You know what I mean? Take it easy. If they do something that you think is not right, there's the proper channels to engage, to make a complaint. It's probably what I can say. Right? Anybody want to add to that, or is that a fair statement? Right? To answer your second question, that is a very good question, man. And that is a tough answer, because we as a community need the social support mechanisms to support this very thing. That links to one of the first questions one of the uncles asked, can profit help with that? Now, if there was businesses out there, people with some financial support, we can establish appropriate centres that can help with that. And there's volunteers out there. Volunteers only go a certain part, so much distance before they need to be paid for things. So, what am I saying here, right? So, we need social support mechanisms. We need these institutes and these rehab centres and these domestic violence shelters. We don't have enough. We need them. So that question, my brother, goes to everybody in this room, not just to us. And that answer lies on the shoulder of each and every one of us to work together in any capacity we have. And that's the very essence of social activism.
just a general thing. Muslims, you're either an engineer, or you're doing business, or you're doing engineer, or you're doing medicine, or you're doing engineer. I'm not going to name the community because I don't want to stigmatize any particular demographic, but in Calgary there was a particular sub-community amongst the Muslims that they were running gangs and they had issues and stuff. And so what the Calgary police did was they started to recruit from this community to get more of that demographic into the police force, because they were recognizing that there's, first of all, a cultural gap and we don't know how to communicate, and there's a distrust between us and them, and we want to incorporate them as part of the police force. So I always encourage Muslims, get into the police force, get into the firefighting career track, get into do psychiatry and do counseling and do all of these things. We need to have a more, this is what's in Islamic law called fard kifaya, communal obligation, which I think that by and large we're failing in multiple ways in the communal obligation. How many Muslim psychiatrists do you know? Like there was a patient that I saw last semester, and this guy was from Iraq. He was 63 years old. He had atrial fibrillation, fluid overload. He was breathing just barely. He thought he was going to die. So he's telling me, that's it, I'm going to check out now, I'm done. So I was like, Muhammad, just take it easy, inshallah, you'll be better. And he's like, his response to me floored me. He said, ما أريد. النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم مات عمره 63 سنة وأنا خلاص. The Prophet صلى الله عليه وسلم died when he was 63 years old. I got to 63 years old, I'm good to go. Now, I'm looking at his medication, and his medication had antidepressants. Because the physician, who was not Muslim, would interpret that as suicidal ideation, he's losing hope in life. And I'm looking at it as like, wow, this is a really spiritual person, I can learn something from him. Right? So that's where I would say, like, you have to contribute in your way in that. That's why I tell Muslims, get into politics, get into finance, get into all these different areas, because we have to fulfill our communal obligation. We have to have Muslims in all of these different areas to fulfill this function, because the point that I was trying to make in my speech was, we don't have this artificial kind of division between your public life and your private life, your belief and your action. All of these things are connected together. And so my advice is, get into the police force. If you're bothered about the police pulling you over, why don't you come and talk to you?
I think we have the last question here at the front, and then we will look to try and continue towards the end of the evening.
Assalamu alaikum, my name is Risa. Thank you very much for your speeches. I suppose with changing the narrative, that involved in changing the narrative is listening to more voices, as our second speaker tonight was talking about listening to more voices. And sometimes those voices can be uncomfortable to hear if they don't fit within our worldview or where we're coming from. And I feel that that's a bit of a challenge in our community. I picked up on that theme in Sister Ikra's question about cultural loyalty in families, some of the tensions that we all experience. And I also picked up on it very, very passionately in the poem delivered by Sister Aisha, which I want to applaud you on because I thought it was just so powerful. And I feel that, this is a question to you, but my question to Sister Aisha is, how does it feel for you having to giving a poem like that to this kind of audience, to your own community, and is it different to when you're talking to non-Muslim communities? And if there was any other time, I'd be interested in what other speakers thought of the poem, what kind of reactions they had.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I guess to me, social activism started at home, and that's the hardest place to start. Voicing your opinions and questioning Islam and questioning your parents' thoughts on culture, and really starting to not bridge those gaps, but understand those gaps that occur, So with my poem, I started off with like me facing child abuse, right? And you know, it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. And you're right, like for me to stand up here and deliver my poem about child abuse, because it's such a taboo topic in our community, it was quite difficult. But I guess, you know, you have to kind of muster that courage, because when you talk about these issues that are like taboo in society and you have experienced that yourself, you're not only healing yourself, but you're also providing that healing to everyone around you. And yeah, for me, social activism started at home, to be honest. And that was the most difficult place, because, you know, you argue with your parents and you can't really, you know, question them, and, you know, I guess it flusters your courage. Like, you don't feel like you can go up to the world and face them anymore, because everything is just starting from home, and, you know, people are questioning you. And yeah, so it took a lot of courage to be able to say what I did. And I think everyone should look within themselves deeply and analyze whatever they've been through, and everyone should, you know, realize that you need to have courage to be able to talk about these issues, because it's not only you who's facing all of that, you know, and there could be a lot of people who can connect with you and your personal story.
I just wanted to say that when I was waiting for my turn and I listened to Aisha, I felt emotionally touched. I could, as a young person, you've shown a lot of courage, and you have a lot of understanding of world events and how it affects people, and also that, yeah, we sit on social media and we're just clicking and liking and sharing and thinking that that's the kind of social activism. Yet it is, but it's just only a part. We actually have to go out and do things, and even if it just means that you do it in your home or in your neighborhood. And that's what I was trying to demonstrate with my talk in my interviews, was that all of us are actually social activists. It's just that, I guess, when you look at the definition and the way it's portrayed, it's like, oh, it's a movement, you have to do it on a big scale, it has to be measured, it has to be seen. But actually, if you're just sharing with your children how to be kind, that's a kind of social activism. If you're helping your neighbor with something, that's a kind of social activism. Any interaction with another person that can bring something good is a social activism. So I felt that maybe the audience weren't so responsive, but I also felt that as Muslims we listen, we reflect, and maybe we're not expressive because that's what we're just looking at what other people are doing. But I think all of you are social activists. As Muslims, it's our duty to smile at people, to be clean, to share. Like a lot of us share food with our neighbors or our families. That's a kind of social activism. And I know a lot of people who are sitting here. I know a lot of people, and each of you are doing something at work, with your children, with your families, looking after your elderly parents. That's a kind of social activism. We see it as a duty, but it's also kind of social activism. I think I'm talking too much now, but thank you.
So one final point. What Aisha did is actually something that Sheikh Abdul Murad mentioned in his speech last year. He said that Muslim civilization, golden age, and when you talk about our past and glorious past, that actually started to decline when the arts declined. So when we don't have poetry to express, when we don't have art to express, when we don't have a cultivated kind of group amongst Muslims, that's why I encourage all the young ones that got inspired by this, get into doing this. And don't expect to produce perfect work right off the bat. You might have to write 1,000 poems before your first piece comes out and it's amazing, which is fine. The problem with this kind of platforms is that you get to see the final product after years of kind of work. Oh my God, you speak so well, it's so easy. You know how many times I had to go through flustered speeches and just losing my words to get to a point where I can be comfortable? So you have to have a bit of courage for yourself and just kind of get into these things. But definitely get into artistic expression, get into poetry writing, get into doing graffiti if that's your thing, music, whatever it is that you're into. Cultivate that in a way where you can think, what kind of, and do it with ihsan. Don't just, half do it. Really get into it. And how can you do an Islamic twist on it? Look at someone like Sami Yusuf. He's amazing. His music is just so mesmerizing. And I know some of you might say music is haram, I don't hold that opinion. But just look at how much ihsan, how much itqan, how much excellence he places into his compositions. They put you into another world. So that's the kind of thing that we need to do so that we can kind of rise up a little bit.
I want to go back to a recurring theme around challenging the narrative. And I guess I want to challenge ourselves that what narrative are we attaching ourselves to? The history of Australian Muslims, or Muslims in Australia, is a beautiful narrative, and that's ours. That's our heritage, which predates European contact in Australia. I'm talking about the Macassans. Such respectful relations, that there was intermarriage, that there was sharing of language, that in corroboree and Aboriginal law contained Arabic components from that interaction, that respectful interaction. To the Cameleers, which were multi-ethnic groups that opened up this country, that went on the Burke and Wills expedition, that provided the water for the camels, for the gold rush, for the economy of this country. To the Albanian Muslims that came and opened up the Snowy River project. To every subsequent group of Muslims that have come and contributed. To farmers up in Mariba that have contributed, that we know of. To many, many groups that have come wave after wave after wave. And then, are we going to attach ourselves to the dominant meta-narrative imposed on Islam, or are we going to reclaim our own narrative, which is alive, and then take that type of advice as to how we're going to take that narrative forward? We have our own narrative. It's a beautiful one. Let's embrace it. Let's share it. And that's the narrative that we move forward with. The last thing I wanted to say, it's a smaller thing, but an important thing. A lot of discussion about dynamic charisma, platforms, things like this. I want to share with you something that Shaq shared with me. And it was a beautiful thing that he said. He said that, and he's a very experienced chef, he's done amazing things, travelling all over the country. His family are incredible, mashallah. The contribution, they would genuinely be social activists. He said to me, I spend my time now and I see myself as the rennet. And I thought, what's rennet? I prepare food, I don't cook. So he explained that the rennet is as a vital ingredient, that without it, the process, the baking doesn't take place. But in the process, that rennet disappears and it's not tasted, not known. But you can see when it's missing. We don't need to be platforms. Sometimes, Allah or a situation will push or thrust you forward. We've seen that with Brother Anas. We've seen that with Sister Rahana. And that's advice. When you see a gap, go and fill it. We don't need to be so humble that we don't step up when we need to. We've heard that and saw it and heard it this evening. But it's not just about being flying high. Be willing to be the remnant. Fill those gaps, be part of the mix. And maybe no one knows about it, but the result will be special because you were involved.
On this part, one chef I asked, because I was struggling with this, and he said to me, if you want to be famous, then you're the slave of fame. And if you want to be hidden, you're the slave of being hidden. But if you're the slave of God, if He wants to make you famous, He'll make you famous. And if He wants to hide you, He'll hide you. So just be with Allah and then make it work out.
Firstly, I'd like you all to join with me to thank our panelists. I would also like to thank you all for attending, for taking your time out on this precious Friday evening to be here. On behalf of all of us, I would like to thank the organisers who have worked to put this event together. Brisbane Muslim Conference, they're hopping around here, unknown, hidden away, just doing what they need to, but providing this platform and developing this platform. As has been said at the beginning, this is not the first, this is the first, but it's not the last of these types of events. And nor should the conversation, nor will the conversation end here. Part of that process of continuing the conversation, continuing the what can we do and what can we be a part of, is to join this journey. We would genuinely, please, sincerely ask you firstly to complete the feedback forms, because they will provide the feedback form that will have a link. It's a tiny URL which you can get outside, and if you register, you'll have that. Provides with the feedback, which is critical, positive, constructive criticism to help develop this initiative, but also what we can do as organisers, as a community towards the development. I'd also like to thank the sponsors of this event, because as with anything, we talked about profit and these events and these kind of initiatives, they can't be they can't be sustainable without individuals and organisations, businesses coming forward and supporting these kind of initiatives. So I'd like to thank Brisbane Diagnostics, and I'd also like to thank the PNC Association from the Australian International Islamic College for supporting this event. There is food outside, so we would like to see you and invite you all. That was a room. Yes. Feel you. Yes. There is food, refreshment outside. But please, when you leave today, don't let this be just a conversation that you came to attend. Think in your own right how you can be those actors of change, social change. As I said, in your own personal nucleus family, to your neighbours, your society, your street, your community, your suburb, Brisbane, Australia, Queensland. Work out what works for you. And for me, personally, what resonated was this thread of whoever is involved and engaged in activism, and whatever we start to find, there is that fear and there's that doubt. Don't let that go. Overcome that fear, overcome that doubt. Don't question yourself. Have the confidence, because you can all make that genuine change. And I hope to see you all again in our future subsequent events, and also initiatives that will be springboarding off this initiative. So thank you very much, everybody.